Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Chris home from Conspire Theory. You have finally found your way into the Fox Den for a collaboration of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. Yet please, I must attend to some business. Ooh, much better. And absolutely delicious. It is always important to feed before a long Dogman expedition. So without further ado, Conspire Theory and StarFox Radio are going to take a walk into the darkness.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf. And everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night, yes. Welcome back to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. We, again, are sitting around the late night fire and burning the midnight timber in an attempt to figure out what is happening across the United States. We have Chris sitting down with us tonight, and yes, he has done a ton of my artwork, and this guy is a legend when it comes to creativity. How you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing good, man. How about you? Doing great.
Excellent. Glad finally getting a chance to link up with you. And dude, I'm on the same page as you, my friend. I am just editing, and repeat. So that's what I will be doing for the rest of the evening as well.
Yeah, the work never ends.
Yes, this is true. So what have you been up to, man?
Lately, I've just been getting a couple episodes out of my podcast, Conspire Theory, on YouTube and Spotify and everywhere you listen to audio podcasts. Pretty much just, hitting up, just throwing up stuff for fun on my Instagram at Conspire Theory, all one word, and, goofing around on Twitter, seeing what the word is. People are spurging out over drones and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, that's funny. I don't know what to think of it, but it's not in my neighborhood, so it is what it is.
That is so true, man. It's one of those things where I take not much stock into that because technology has been occurring every year. We develop more new things. So the fact that people just take so much into that kind of makes me chuckle because this is just my thoughts. Obviously, of course, there is intellectual life inside of the universe. I mean, it's a massive place. There's no way we're the best we can do. But honestly, again, just my thoughts. I don't see why any sort of intellectual race would want to come down and chill with us. I mean, we destroy ourselves daily, and we've pretty much pillaged our earth of all nutrients. So, I mean, again, I just don't really see why they would want anything to do with us, but that's just my opinion.
Well, I mean, have you seen our reality TV? That drama it's on peak, man. We have the best drama. And that's the only real resource that we have, because if you want any real resources, if you want gold, you can get it elsewhere. If you want water, just hop on a comet, and stuff like that. If you got intergalactic abilities and stuff like that, there's no resources here to purge other than what, Mary said to Sue last week on Desperate Housewives or something of that nature. It seems like our drama's our only exportable resource that makes us worth anything.
Is that not the truth, man? We are pretty humorous. That is for sure. And I would like you to, well, for a little bit here, just give me a little bit of a background as to what got you into cryptids or your thoughts on, the Dogman in general. And then, yes, we are going to dive into, well, one pretty famous Texas encounter. And then, well, since you're down south, you've probably potentially heard of the other one I'll speak of. But yeah, man, where do you sit with all this stuff?
I think I've always had like a toe in the paranormal, but then I started my podcast about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's been like slowly rolling. It's starting to really ramp up now, but I would keep it going for like just quite a while because it was sort of my own special thing. And I just love talking spooky stuff. I love listening to these shows talking about spooky stuff, and it's just always got me because everybody has had a unsettling encounter with something else, and they really don't know what the answers are or how to just how to even grasp mentally what it is that they could have run into. And either some people just dismiss it and some people just latch on to it, and that's what we are. We're the latter. We latch onto this stuff, and some of us can have fun with it, and some people it gets just to be like a means to an end, and it can end up destroying their lives. But the thing is that I try to keep myself at least 1 foot in, and I try to limit my connectivity to it, so that way I'm not going in so deep that I can get myself pulled down like an unsettling rabbit hole or unraveling myself somehow. You got to get yourself that nice buffer of space, so that way you don't have to you can't get as much splashback. And as for the Dogman, I just find it the most fascinating because I've always been down with like werewolves and stuff like that. And it's just always been an interest of mine because, I like read comic books and anime and cartoons, and, the werewolves and stuff like that. They're some of the coolest characters, I mean, of course, they're almost always the bad guys, which is sort of my, like, I'd like to see some good guy werewolves and Dogman, but, that's just not the case, but hey, it is what it is.
Great stuff right there, man. And yeah, I'm a total nerd myself. I love to learn, so I find myself in this day and age really entertained by knowledge, but I also, before bed, sometimes like to just, zoink out a little bit. And growing up, man, yeah, I was huge into animes and stuff. And I'm going to make two references. I feel like my favorite type of characters, even, per se, like The Witcher, The Crow, The Punisher, Alucard from Hellsing, Alucard from Castlevania. Those are my type of characters I enjoy. They're not good or bad. They don't go out of their way to do either or, but, they still have a conscience. And like I said, they don't commit evil. So I believe it's like what? Unlawful neutral or something to be a total nerd and use the old school Dungeons and Dragon terms. But there is a pretty cool, I don't even know if I'd call it an anime on Netflix. I believe it's Love and Robots that has a gnarly Skinwalker werewolf one, man.
Yeah, I've heard about that. I think I know what you're talking about. I'll have to check it out if it hasn't crossed my desk yet. But yeah, a lot of cool stuff out there.
Yeah, I think you would really enjoy that. And also, there is another, I believe it's a French film that just came out on Netflix, and it's more of a family-oriented one. But dude, it's like Jumanji kind of in regards of they have this old werewolf game, and they legit go back in time where all these villagers are terrified by werewolves and stuff. It's super dope. Like I said, it's not violent and such. It's a funny movie, meaning, for example, like one guy gets shot with an arrow He's like, and this woman pulls it out, and he's like, and the other person's like, you're not supposed to pull it out, put it back in. So she shoves it back in, and he's like, again, or whatever. And then somebody else comes over. They're like, oh, dude, you need help, and they rip the arrow out again. And the same thing. They're like, oh, it's not supposed to be out. Shove it back in. And the guy's like, will you stop touching me? And it's pretty funny, man. So like I said, it's got like a comedic twist, but the werewolves in it look super cool, and they still have their human traits, meaning if one was a pot-bellied guy with a limp in real life, well, when he was a werewolf, same thing, he had a pot belly and walked a little bit different. The elder one, who had gray hair and stuff, her fur was a little bit more gray. So yeah, that's definitely worth checking out too, man.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of good stuff out there too, and it's not all bad, but I do think the werewolf and stuff, they gotta get out of the old horror trope of always being the bad guy, always being the villain. One of my favorite movies was like the Underworld series with that one lady, and she's like going through, and it's always a vampires versus werewolves thing. And that was always cool. I love that. That was fun.
Definitely dope. My favorite one out of that franchise would definitely be The Rise of the Lycans. And he actually isn't a bad guy in that. He is the one that ends up having his girlfriend, who is, or I should say lover, which is the daughter of the High of Vampires. And they're not about that. So they put her underneath the sun and she disintegrates. And he basically ends up rebelling against the vampires. That's pretty cool. And also, I thought it was dope, Van Helsing with Hugh Jackman. Some people have beefs and such, but he was a good guy in that too as a werewolf, correct?
Yeah, I do remember that one. That was a good one as well. I enjoyed it. It was campy and fun, and that's what you get out of the Hammer films. That's what they're for.
Yeah, I really like the environment, and I mean, obviously they use some CGI, but some parts of that, man, the werewolf looks so sick. Like when it's jumping through the fire on the train, and also when it's like jumping up out of the trap and like snapping at him and running through like the tall grass towards Kate Beckinsale. Yeah, man. I mean, ironically, she's the one in Underworld as well, too.
Yeah, funny, huh?
I know, right? That's so awesome. But yeah, man, Converse werewolf is a really interesting one because, again, I'm a huge person for science. Okay, I have a science team, and they are all beautiful minds. And I always try to, in general, listen to people that are super smart, even if they have nothing to do with the Midnight Society, the North American Dogman Project. Doesn't matter. I mean, if they're smart and they have great knowledge, well, I want to dive in and learn. And again, I always tell everybody I'm very subjective and objective, and I'm a healthy skeptic about the topic because we all know human testimonial is not really quality. I mean, again, I've spoken about it, and if anyone wants to check out some previous episodes, and you can check out your own documentaries and such about why human testimonial is not really something that is quality when it comes to evidence, okay? So, not saying people don't see things, all right, but for every person or people that might actually see something, realistically, there's some that are going to be prefabricating, delusional, etc. So I'm always open to sway my opinions, but like I use this for an example, the Loch Ness Monster. I've already broken it down on another podcast I pop on where I talk things outside of what I talk about here, and all the beautiful minds that have pushed me in the direction as to why I don't think that's feasible. Well, if those same beautiful minds and other beautiful minds sat down with me and showed me the same great evidence as to why I don't believe in Loch Ness Monster, then yeah, of course would be willing to sway my thought process. But that's just how I approach something. So evidence is beautiful, not really images anymore, because images, well, we all know where we're rolling with all that and how every 2 seconds people put in the AI and they're like, oh, check this out, this trail cam. I'm talking about things like unknown vocalizations that we can send out to people where they can see if it's been cut or modified or if it falls into categories of known animals. We have those on file. I'm talking about why there are hyena-like tracks here in North America. We have those on file. I mean, we do know they existed in the past, but apparently they're supposed to be extinct and not living here. So why are there tracks here? Same thing with baboons. Also, we have tracks we can't verify that look like your foot or my foot, except for the claw on the back and the claws on the front, which if something was to be bipedal to an extent, like a squirrel could be, if you look at their feet, it would have to be kind of elongated like that. So that's what I mean about evidence. And I like to deal with facts. And the reality is people are missing in our national forests. People are missing near cave systems. And also anywhere from 1,100 to 2,400 people are missing yearly. Okay, 5% of these people are found, the rest never. Those are all facts. All right. And that's how I wish everyone would, when they want to sit down and talk to me, be able to show some things like that if they want me to really be able to use what they're telling me as a benefit to science, because a lot of times people will send in just a footprint. Okay, well, you could have sat there all day making that. You could have also just had someone else helping you and you took one picture of that. But where's the video of numerous footprints? What is this, a one-legged animal that just appears? What's the terrain looking like? And then other people contact us or myself and then say, hey, I don't want anybody over here, but this is occurring. As a person of science and dealing with logic, how can I just sit there and take an email or something like that as scientific evidence,
Yeah. And then that often lies into, well, what we have is the other secondary half of that, which is folklore. And Converse Werewolf is a perfect example of folklore. It took place in like the ye olden times, and I think it was shreds of a newspaper. And we knew that at the time, newspapers would get into these sort of, one-upmanship wars of trying to see who could come up with the most outlandish story and to sell papers, But that doesn't change the fact that this stuff is still, the fabric of our Americana, that it does have, folklore is sort of important because it shapes us culturally. But, whether or not we can, put it in a lab and prove it or not, I understand the prerequisites of the the scientific, process and all that stuff. But I treat these folklores as though they're, treasured baseball cards. Like, oh, this is my favorite story, swapping them, just holding them close to the chest. And they serve as a good sort of record of where a lot of the culture now is coming from by looking at it from where it's been. It's sort of, I guess, for archival historical purposes that I felt that it is significant and important. So long as we recognize that it's a cultural folklore, because I love lore. And the thing is with the Converse Werewolf, the initial story is that in the ye olden times, I guess either late 1800s, I believe a father and son were on a barn. The son wasn't carrying his weight, so in order to build character, the father gave him a rifle of some kind, whatever was prevalent at the time, and it said, "Go out and hunt, dinner for this evening. Go be a man, etc." And then the son goes out and he doesn't bring anything back. And then the father puts him out, like, oh, well, go do it again. Go bring something. Don't come back until you bring something, till you drop something. And then the son comes back again in a panic and says, there's a monster out there. There's a big monster out there. And of course, the father believes that the son is just trying to skirk responsibility. So, of course, taking a stern upbringing, and he's like, well, like, there's no monster out there. If there is, just shoot it and bring it back. Well, the son goes out and this time doesn't come back. And of course, the father gets worried, and then he gets up a posse to go and find wherever it is that his son is, believing that he probably, got himself into some trouble. And then when they find upon him, what they say is that they walk onto a sort of dogman werewolf-like being who is, of course, chowing down on what's left of the kid. And then they shoot at it. It, of course, just gets mad and then scurries off. And I believe that that's the end of the account. At least I can remember off the top of my head. and you can see how that sort of parallels what the modern incantation of what we see of Dogman nowadays. That this sort of thing has sort of like already existed in our folklore, and we wonder like this puts us in a particular interest of, well, what came first, chicken or the egg, in reference to our lore, with what the evidence has shown us so far from the behavior, from the anecdotal evidence presented by those that have experienced it. And I really don't know what to do with it, but I guess I'll go ahead and let you chew on that for a while.
Man, that's beautiful stuff right there. And to touch base as to what you had said before you started diving into that, I'm a huge advocate of Native American and indigenous lores and history, because cultures that spent time out in the forest and things definitely knew the differences as to what it is that they were seeing. But when it comes to, say, like the medieval and more modern day times, I tend to not put as much merit into that. And the reason I say that is we all know what happened during the medieval times. It's like we reverted in intellect. I mean, the civilizations before them were pretty advanced, and then we just went back to being like insane. I mean, you and I could grow cucumbers and make our own salad. Oh, they're witches or werewolves. Back then, oh, geez, that time frame was very lost, where I feel like they didn't really have a grasp on reality, whereas like the indigenous cultures did have a grasp on reality. And again, modern day times, everyone's about hoaxing, dude, now and such. So not that an encounter from yesterday isn't credible, but like you said, something you just told me holds more merit in my eyes, because back then hoaxing's not really a thing. People don't really have time for that. I mean, I'm not back then, nor are you, but something tells me your and I's sense of humor back then probably wouldn't have been a thing, correct?
Well, it's not that there wasn't hoaxing. It's just there were barriers of entry to what could be hoaxed and what could be done. Today, yeah, with AI and prevalent stuff like that, we could hoax, an alien invasion just with everything on our cell phone right now. Just pay the right subscriptions to the right programs, and blip blop bloop, we got an alien invasion that looks photorealistic. Back then, they had only so much that they could do with, which was, photographs weren't at technologically set where they are now. Even though back then we find evidence of people taking funny pictures of their pets with their dog smoking a cigar or a pipe or something like that. And so we haven't changed that much, but our technology has gotten better. But we, of course, as a people, haven't, in some instances. And the thing is that, back then there was, it is reasonable to assume that, hoaxes could have been prevailed simply by as I said, newspapers getting into wars, readership wars, trying to see what fantastical account could sell a story more. Like we probably see that with like Wildman, where maybe someone did come to the newspaper with a legitimate Sasquatch or Sasquatch-like encounter, and then they took it and decided, well, I'm gonna this and that and spruce it up for the paper somehow, and it's that sort of I don't know, that sort of thing that tends to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It gets away from us even back then.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense for sure, because a newspaper is a catch-22, like you said, because there are times where recently, you must have heard of this one too, like Bobby Businger down in Vidor, Texas. I mean, the newspaper and such really pointed in the direction of some sort of werewolf-like creature, but he talks about it and says the sky was huge and did act animalistic, it was like howling and banging on his house, but he didn't look like a werewolf per se. So back then, the newspaper rolled with that, probably because it sold more titles, like you said, but that information came from somewhere. So again, pretty interesting stuff. And before I read you another pretty gnarly encounter here from Texas, did you want to touch base on anything else with that encounter?
No, I think I pretty much got it. We got like a lot of the things where we do have like psychologically diagnosed lycanthropy, which is a form of mental illness, which, people like get into this sort of savagery, and it's more of a mental thing. And a lot of people want to liken that to lycanthrope encounters. And they want to say, well, no, every single account of that, to broad brush it, to explain it away. And in some cases it works, but in other cases it probably doesn't. But, because of that, there is a probable Arkham's razor out there for it. We probably, there's no, harm in us to keep looking, so long as we keep our heads level on what it is that we're looking for, and just keep our wits about us.
Boom. Great stuff right there. And yeah, that's just what I mean about trying to just be logical about something, because where I'm still trying to see if there's any sort of, I guess, facts to this, but I recently heard about a woman supposedly that was feeding beef jerky to Dogman around a fire. Could that occur? Sure. I mean, I don't think Dogmen are canine necessarily, and we'll dive into
Well,
that.
if it was teriyaki blend, I'd be there.
So I mean, yeah, that's definitely how like humans befriended wolves and such. But again, I don't think dogmen are necessarily canine, and I've spoken about it before, and we'll talk about it again in the future, some more of that. But hey, sounds cool. Really no sort of anything to back it up besides that woman's testimonial. So again, I mean, like I said, super interesting. Can I say it's true? No. Can I say it's not true? No. So it's one of those ones that just sits pretty much in limbo, I feel like, until we can bring some more clarity to it.
Hmm. Yeah, nothing wrong with that, so long as we recognize it as so. I can understand some people, they try to take this and they try to make patterns with it, which I understand. You're trying to solve something. But in some cases, if stuff doesn't line up properly, we get into the habit of trying to massage the facts to prove our narrative. In the alien abduction, I think a lot of people had, done so with their stuff, and I don't know. We got to be cautious, always cautious.
Love how you say that, because that's something that my science team preaches. And same thing with myself is to be a good journalist or a good scientist, you got to do good science. And people will be like, what do you mean, Star Fox? What's bad science? Well, bad science is putting things into the narrative that you want to spin to then change your hypothesis into a theory, even though you potentially are leaving out things to make it fit into your theory. Whereas good science and a good journalist, we form an opinion that we might not want to be true, meaning I'll use an example for animals because I'm a big animal advocate. Maybe this species of animals is very endangered and we don't want that, but this is what the evidence is supporting and such. That's good science, okay? You don't plug things in to make it fit your narrative, like you said. So very well spoken.
Yeah, so go ahead and let me know about that other tale that you had in Texas. I'm really curious. You have me sitting on edge for quite a while, so let's have at it.
Yeah, it's the way, got to keep them hanging, right, my friend? All right, so it's 1876. We got Lake View. It's late one night during a terrible rainstorm, and a farmer is out checking on his livestock when suddenly he comes across an enormous, jet black, wolf like creature chomping down on one of his cows. Startled, the farmer began retreating, and to his horror, this black wolf stood up on two legs and began bolting towards him. Realizing he was nearing the end of his existence, the farmer turned around and bolted back to his farmstead. The man reported hearing loud, terrifying howls before everything fell silent. Telling his story to one of his Native American friends, he is informed the town folk believe this creature is somehow hiding amongst them. For days, everyone is hearing the howls and screeching of this bizarre creature. Unfortunately, some even began to come face to face with it. The locals sat down at the tavern to try and figure out a plan, and about a week later, the sheriff decides to mandate a 9 p.m. curfew. As he is out patrolling the area, he realizes it is extremely silent. Putting his hand down on his revolver, the deputy suddenly hears strange growling up ahead near a church. As he approaches, he sees what looks to be an enormous, a jet black, wolf like creature trying to open the doors and the windows to the church. Bewildered, the deputy watches as the creature turns around and stares at him before bolting on two legs in his direction. Firing his gun and hitting the animal numerous times, it lets out a yelp before tossing the sheriff like a rag doll and running off into the darkness of a large barn. Once gaining his composure, the deputy stumbles in the direction of the fleeing animal, and as the man is searching, he sees the strange beast holding on to the rafters with its human-like raccoon hands. Firing up at the animal, it leaps down upon the sheriff as it rips into his forearm. Screaming out in pain, the sheriff shoots the animal point blank in the side of its head, and it screams out in agony before stumbling off and darting into the night.
That's pretty harrowing.
Yeah, and like you said, it's another one of those old school ones, man, and it's pretty well spoken about down in that area. And one of my buddies and one of my favorite cryptozoologists, Lyle Blackburn, has informed me about a ton of things like this down in the Lone Star State. And had you heard about that before? And where do you feel that should stand?
That specific story, I don't know that I've come across it, but there's a lot of other Dogman encounters that people have across the state. There's so much of the state that's like just nothing. And so it's easy to imagine that anything that's on a migrational pattern or just searching for various hopping from food source to food source is going to have plenty of open space to run out and just go about its business. And just under the, whether even if it's in the night or open day, be completely unseen, So as far as we have so many cryptozoologists here, as you said, like Ken Gerhardt, Aaron Deese, and all these other type of really good people. And, there are so many stories of people who live on the outskirts of the cities that tend to see quite a bit of activity. And what it all means, I really don't know what to do with it, but it's certainly, now that we're paying closer attention, I think, in a couple of decades or so, we'll probably start to see, something happen.
Great stuff right there. And yeah, I am pretty good friends with Aaron Deese and Heather Moser from Small Town Monsters. They're dope. And they come on to Midnight Lycanthropy whenever they can. And they are definitely part of the Midnight Society and do a ton of great stuff. So look at that, man. Beautiful minds think alike, eh? So great stuff right there. And down in Texas, besides what we spoke about right there, as we are starting to round home base here, what is your favorite encounter, I guess? And what is the one that you would say you feel is the most likely to be real? They can both be the same if they both are, or you could maybe have one that you think is cool, but you're not sure if it's necessarily true. And then, like I said, which one do you find that in your area really holds some validity?
Well, one of the things that I really enjoy here is the Donkey Lady Bridge. I've been reading a lot of accounts about that, and a lot of people have been doing research here on it, and it's sort of more of a specter ghost story, similar to the yokai of Japan, except in more downtown San Antonio instead. and it's sort of gotten a life of its own. And I find that really interesting and cool. And it's just a fascinating story, and I'm still trying to dig up on it. But there are so many accounts over there. I think there are two prevailing stories so far, and of course it's a lot to take in because it's a similar creature like the Lachuza or the La Llorona, where it's sort of a female, gets put in a compromised position and then returns with a vengeance as a spectral spirit. But the donkey lady is sort of like it's sort of more of a fun hometown thing. As far as anything that I think is most likely real, that's a really hard to say because there's so many conversations about so many instances that I really can't point to any type of one or fantastical encounter unless I've had it myself and say, oh yeah, that really happened. But then we see that, that reality itself can be skewed, because like we were talking earlier, like you said, humans are the worst observers. So like people, even if they saw what they believe they saw, who knows if that's actually what they saw? And of course, it's in our human nature to get defensive. It's like, well, I know what I saw. And it's, yes, I believe what you believe what you saw. But on the other hand, and then I have to go question, but who knows if what that actually was, what it is that you saw, like as if the phenomenon itself, in fleeting glances and in sense of awes and being able to sparsely be recorded, it could be just as deceptive as any hoaxer. So who knows if someone sees what they think is a UFO could actually be some sort of undiscovered gelatin creature that's in the that just happened to slip down from the upper atmosphere, or if what we perceive as Bigfoot could actually be some type of fey creature transcending dimensions or realities or something of that nature. I know that's getting a bit more fantastical, but it's pretty much it's all on the plate if we haven't locked down anything and absolutely proven that one thing, then they're kind of all free to roam against it, because it's just there's just so much out there. And as far as the story that I believe is true, I have a really hard time with that because the more I learn about stuff, the more I start to doubt whether or not any of this stuff is actually real. But I do believe that there is an underlying something else that we are interacting with that makes us have these encounters. And I liken it to the alien abduction phenomenon, where it's like the Betty and Barney Hill encounter. Like, yeah, I believe they had the encounter that they had, but whether or not it happened the way that they believe it did, whether it was aliens or some type of psyop or some type of dark psychiatric reaction to trauma that would have been relevant at the time, who's to know who the real culprit is? But the experience itself, as far as they understand it, was real to them. And I do think that there is something there. I don't think it's an answer, but I think it is sort of a good placeholder until we learn more.
Boom, that's some great stuff right there, man. And I definitely would like to collaborate more with you for sure, because you have a very similar thought process when approaching this topic as I do. And before we let you get back to your busy schedule, I got some pretty interesting little tidbits of information here. There are 3 movies that actually nod their head to real life supposed werewolf encounters. And the first one, I do not remember the exact number because there are so many. The first, second, and whichever one this one is are good, but then once you hit like 7 or 8 and the marsupials, the howlings turn to insanity. But this one takes place in an old castle where supposedly werewolf sightings actually were occurring. So that's the only part of it that has any fact. The rest of the movie is just a movie. Pretty cool. And then An American Werewolf in London. I have a couple friends over in the United Kingdom that have told me that the slaughtered lamb, which is the tavern in that movie, is actually based off a real tavern where people had been reported to be seeing these strange like things, and they would come in and speak about it, and it was actually near the moors. And the person that made American Werewolf in London had heard about that and thought it was a pretty cool little twist right there. And the final one is from Silver Bullet by Stephen King, in the beginning, where that guy that's working on the railroad gets busted over the head with a 2x4. Well, that actually, again, is something that happened supposedly in Defiance, Ohio, which is pretty cool that when making this movie, Stephen King wasn't just making it because he thought, necessarily werewolves were cool and such. He had heard about that. And that's sick that way back then, that type of knowledge was still being passed around. Because, I mean, Stephen King was up here, and that happened down in Ohio. And I don't know. I wasn't around when that occurred, so I don't know if it was in newspapers or what. But that's just pretty cool that he gave a nod to it, and actually all those movies did. How do you feel about that before we let you roll, man?
Yeah, I like the Defiance encounter. What I find most odd wasn't so much that the werewolf picked up a 2x4, a melee weapon, but that he was doing it while he was adorned in a plaid, outfit and in a plaid overshirt that was all like, they say it was all torn up, but who knows? I mean, he was probably just some type of grunge era stoner, and maybe his Nirvana tape got stuck, so he was all pissed off, and someone had to pay for it. So who knows, man?
Awesome. No, that's what I mean, because again, those are all very cool, interesting things. And I mean, I try to verify it and back it up as much as possible, but we're only talking about hearsay again. I mean, no one can show photos, footprints, or anything from that, castle. It's just, again, lore, which is interesting. And then same thing with American Werewolf in London. I mean, that tavern is there. People tell you they see things, but as far as I know, no one's got hair, footprints, vocalizations, anything that we can really use. And like you said, with the Defiance, Ohio one, interesting, but it's almost kind of like humorous to an extent. And besides that, well, there's not much to go off of. And I mean, it is verified the guy was a town drunk. Not saying drunk people can't be seeing what they're seeing, but we're talking about somebody that's influenced by a substance. And yeah, we don't need to go down that road at the moment. But yes, okay. Other people did see it too, I guess. So yeah, but again, we're talking about something, not saying that those other people didn't see something. And like you put it best, I'm not stating you didn't see something. I'm just interested in what you really saw, man. I mean, that is just so well put, because that is how I fall into so many of these. I do believe these people are seeing things and such, but again, what are you seeing? So I do appreciate that. That's excellent.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to the Defiance encounter, I mean, we know now that alcohol is not a hallucinogen, but however, I hear that I don't know, but I hear that caffeine could be. So maybe, all these ghost hunters that like to, in the middle of the night, in an empty, dark house with, they're outside of their circadian rhythm, and then they hype themselves up on caffeine to push through. So who knows if the ghost that's bumping into them is really, the actual ghost themselves, or if they've worked themselves into a frenzy with a caffeine demon. It's there are so many factors, and it's good that we learn about this stuff, because these old practices and stuff, a lot of them existed for a purpose to benefit us, like like washing our hands and stuff of this nature was sort of like a means of preservation and survival. And and I think that we need to recognize that and not lose sight of that, but also keeping it in the context of all the new information that we do learn as far as how to handle stuff moving forward. And that's why we got to, like you and me, just keep learning, keep practicing, keep honing our skills, just keep moving forward.
Vinny Vinci. I came, I saw, I conquered, man. Look at that, bro. You legend. That is just so spot on. And before I let you go, is there anything else you would like to touch base on, man, or inform the audience about, like upcoming projects or?
At the moment, not right now, but when I get stuff more in the chamber, I'll definitely come back and tell you all about it. So all I can say now is tell people, hey, just wait.
Ooh, you legends, you. I do adore every single one of you. And thank you for stopping in tonight. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share my content. Feed the algorithm. And I will catch you very soon.